Acapulco, Mexico. This is Anarchast.
I'm completely unable to hear you.
Hear me. That's because
now I can hear you.
I always forget to hit buttons. So this looked even more insane than it was supposed to be. The first question I have to ask you, Danny, host of the libertarianism and economics related YouTube channel, public speaker and debater, is where is your mask?
A mask? Well, is it? Why do we need a mask? What's happening?
We're going to die, like really soon. Die. Yeah, like I have 2 masks to make me like double safe. Like, where's yours?
And you're thinking the eye is the main entry point for that.
That's how it gets in, man. How are you doing? How you been?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks very much for asking. Yourself?
It's good, man. It's good. So, having a blast here. So, welcome to the show. Like I said, I've watched your channel for about a year now. I have seen like the older content you had. It seems like you've sort of gone through several phases of your understanding and libertarian ideas, and you do a lot of great debates on your channel, and you're really good, I think, at at describing and discussing libertarian ideas. And I think we need more of that. So you're one of the people out there that I want to highlight and I want to send people to. And so the best way I know to do that is to bring you on the show and talk through it. So,
thanks very much for that. Yeah, I've only just become part of the libertarian movement. Really, like I've only just basically started being a libertarian. I say only just, meaning a couple of years now. But that's a minority of my YouTube career. So you're right. If you go back, you will see I've deleted some of the stuff or privated some of the stuff, but you'll see a fair bit of silly things that I've said in the past. But I think it's good to have that up there as a growth, a description of growth.
It absolutely is. Yeah, and
someone can go back there and see, well, he was wrong, maybe I can be wrong too. So maybe less embarrassed about it and more willing to learn. I don't know. That's my hope. That's my excuse.
Or somebody that agrees with those positions will start with that content and then find your newer stuff and maybe be convinced by it. That's definitely, like, there's stuff on my other channels that I leave up that I now sort of disagree with, and that's good. That's good, man. So the first question I have to ask you is, how did you become an anarchist? And I think that could actually be this entire show. I just want to sort of dive in, learn about you, find out where you started and how you got to where you are. Right.
It depends how far back I want to go, but I'll just basically start from when I got onto YouTube. I got pulled onto YouTube because so you probably, if you were aware with the YouTube milieu, you will have seen the anti-SJW thing that happened around, starting 2014, 15, 16. And I basically got pulled into that. I saw someone wrong on the internet and decided that I had to respond.
But it's a noble fight, sir. It is a noble fight.
Right? But eventually I was debating with people, and I started getting pulled towards a nationalist direction. You remember like the Trump, Le Pen, Brexit thing around 2016?
Yes.
I got pulled into that whole nationalist movement. But one of the sorts of characters who was debating me at that time were socialists. Mm-hmm. And they said a lot of things about economics that I didn't have the understanding really to engage with, but I did notice that a lot of them were self-contradictory and stupid. So I wanted to learn a little bit more just so I could explain to people what was exactly wrong with what they're saying. And it was actually debating socialists that primarily turned me into a libertarian. Just socialists really? Saying stuff, socialists saying stuff and me be going, well, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, I get what you're coming from, but it doesn't make sense about this. And then their response would usually not be to calmly refute what I'm saying. It would be to get very, very angry. And so I started learning a bit more about economics. I discovered, the Austrians. I read a lot of Bob Murphy, Murray Rothbard, and Mises. I read Human Action at least. And the socialist calculation problem. And that pretty much made me a libertarian, but I wasn't so sure about the anarchism thing, which was your question, which I'm eventually getting to.
No, take your time.
Well, that was until I discovered David Friedman, Brian Kaplan, Michael Huemer, those sorts of characters. These are libertarians, but not deontologists, right? They don't believe that thou must always follow the nap. They think, well, generally aggression is bad, it seems, but we want to be a little bit more humble about it and we'll just say we have a presumption in favor of non-aggression, and let's see if there's any good arguments for aggression, right? For having a state, an organized institution of aggression. It turns out the arguments for that, even if you don't take the strong, hardline NAP position, the arguments in favor of aggression just on a utilitarian ground are terrible, right? It does not tend to produce good outcomes. And so that was where I eventually got into anarchism.
The first time I talked to Huemer was on Facebook, and this is a perfect illustration of why people need to get the hell off those platforms. But, I made some post with some arguments about the non-aggression principle, and this dude named Huemer replies with some just flippant, dismissive, non-argument response, and I had no idea who he was, and I said something like, dude, go blog about it. I don't care about random internet people's opinions. And it turns out that, he's put a lot of thought into this stuff. None of it was contained in this thread, of course. He's put a lot of thought into it, and he has a blog. And so I bet he thought that I knew who he was, and I was just being crappy. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
So you were convinced by the non-deontological sort of arguments for anarchism?
Especially David Friedman. If you watch my Why I'm an ANCAP video, about 60% of that video is straight up stolen from David Friedman. I stole his intellectual property, if you will.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. No, it's, I've watched a little bit of your stuff as well. I discovered you when you did that debate with Mike Shipley. But the main thing that... are you a deontologist? Do you consider yourself a NAP-believing deontological libertarian?
I would not consider myself a hard deontologist, but I have yet to find a good exception to the non-aggression principle. So I'm somewhere in there. Do you
pull the lever in the trolley problem?
I should... no, not without the consent of the people I'd be killing by doing it. No, yeah.
What if instead we loaded up the trolley with nuclear weapons and sent it towards a city, or you pull the lever and one guy dies?
I will not be involved in violating anyone's consent. There's a hard line.
Wow, like the Earth is going to explode, or by some contrived machinations, the Earth explodes, or you kill one guy.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm not exploding. I'm not killing anybody. No, not happening.
Okay, but you have to give someone a paper cut against their will, or the Earth explodes.
You should come on the show and interview me next time, and we can go into this.
Well, I think that kind of does get to my... I'm just trying to make a point, right? Like that you can see where I might get off, even if you don't agree. Like you can see where someone might reasonably get off the train with the... that was not meant to be a pun. With respect to the deontology, the NAP thing. Like that would say that, okay, on a basic philosophical moral level, there might be situations where it's justified to violate the NAP. And I also don't think that really matters too much in real life or anything you might actually advocate for, because something that I think deontological libertarians have always noted, and Rothbard definitely noted it, is that the deontological side of libertarianism, the things it advocates would produce good utilitarian results, at least according to libertarians. So, yeah. I mean, it was going to produce good results anyway. Everyone we're talking to wants good results. I mean, it seems like the more important area to focus on, at the very least, is the results of the things we're advocating for, as opposed to the fundamental philosophy.
That's like a subjective evaluation thing. Like, this is not supposed to be a debate. No, but this is good. I enjoy this.
Yes.
So I'm happy to challenge you. Yeah. So, but that's just your subjective interpretation of what the outcome will be. That's what you predict based on your own personal subjective opinion will be the best outcome in the future. That can and has led to a lot of really bad outcomes and a lot of consent violation and pain and suffering. And that doesn't seem like a clear sort of framework with which to make moral decisions, right?
Well, I mean, it's based on objective reality. So, sure, our estimation of what is going to occur when we do something is imperfect, but it's not so imperfect. If we can reasonably predict that if I drop something, it'll fall. That's a result that we expect from the action that we take, and therefore we take that action, right? That's kind of how we always take action, is we figure out what the results of what we're going to do is going to be. If it seems good, we do it. Like 90% of the time, that's what we're doing. Like maybe some other small percentage of the time we're not.
I wish I had a Kathy Newman wig to put on right now. So what you're saying is... So what you're saying is that, like, it seems like the only difference between your position and the rote statist position is that you just think the statists are wrong about the outcomes that they're going to get through their authoritarian stances. Like, everyone's acting, not everyone, both sides, you and the statist, are acting in a way that they think will produce the best outcomes. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, think about what you just said. It's like, you basically agree with the statists. You think that they're right, except that they're wrong.
Not me.
That's a pretty big difference. No, you just said that I agree with the statists, except for the fact that I think they're wrong. That's a pretty big difference. That's why. So I advocate the systems that I advocate for because I think they'll have good results. And the statists advocate for the system they advocate for because they think that'll bring good results. But they're wrong and I'm right.
Both justify their means by their ends. Like, so you can't tell a statist they're wrong for having a cop point a gun at me to keep me from running a stop sign, because they're just acting in a way that they think will produce the best outcome, which is the same justification you would use. Okay, but it's the same justification.
Let's have a simpler version so that it's more obvious. Let's go with like a radical Muslim blows himself up because he thinks God will reward him, right?
Sure.
And you can just say, well, he thinks that that's going to have good outcomes. Right, and I think most people watching this are not radical Muslims. They don't believe that that's the case. Mm-hmm. If he thinks that has a good outcome, you could say, well, he has just as much justification as you do for drinking your coffee in the morning. You think that'll have a good outcome, namely you'll be awake and have a delicious beverage in your mouth. But he's wrong. Right, the difference between you can only know that he's wrong.
You can only know that he's wrong post facto. Sorry to keep interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, I can know he's wrong beforehand. Like, I am very confident that he is not going to get rewarded by God, right? And so let's think about it from another perspective then. Let's go with a deontologist saying that they're going to take an action that they think won't result in violating someone's rights. It might, though, right? You might do something and it might inadvertently harm someone. Anything you do has some chance of harming them. So at the end of the day, you're looking at objective reality and trying to figure out what's going to result in you not aggressing upon people. It still does require some empirical analysis of reality, and you're going to take action based on that. So I don't see where that makes your deontological approach more reliable than a consequentialist one.
This is not the interview I thought it'd be, but I'm having more fun this way, so let's continue. Yeah. So where do you place the culpability? Do you place the culpability on the intent or on what actually happens?
I think it's a little bit of both. That's how common law developed, mens rea and actus rea, the guilty mind and the guilty act. We say, did a bad thing occur? Was this person intending that bad thing to occur? Yeah, all right, then we blame them. And the reason we only blame people when they are responsible for something, when they caused it, is because if we blame them if I try to blame you for the sun setting in the evening, it's not going to stop the sun from setting in the evening. But if I blame you for, punching me, perhaps you will not punch me. Right, so that's why we blame people for their actions, because they're the ones with control over them. So it's pragmatic to do so.
I would say the difference is if the intent of an action is a hopelessly subjective thing, and you can't make objective statements about intent. You can make objective statements about what actually happens. And so it's two separate categories. One is what happens. That establishes if a crime occurred or not, and has nothing to do with intent or what you meant to do. It is the true or false statement of, was that a crime as it actually already occurred in the past? And then maybe when determining like what the restitution or what the punishment should be, then you can involve subjective judgments like intent or what you meant to do, or you were trying to save the person and then ended up killing them. What's the thing when the medic There's like a legal exemption where if a medic accidentally does harm while trying to save someone's life, they have some kind of immunity from prosecution. I forgot what the name of that was, but that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you keep referring to intent, right? And actually, let's go back an even step. You keep referring to subjectivity and objectivity. Those two concepts, they appear to be only a linguistic distinction to me. So if I say that I like ice cream, you would say that that's subjective, because if you said it, it might be false. If I said it, it would be true, right? So ice cream is good. Let's make it even more clear. I say ice cream is good. That really just means that I personally enjoy ice cream. You mean you personally don't enjoy ice cream. But if I then say that Danny enjoys ice cream, referring to me, then if you said that same thing, that would either be true or false, and it's objectively the case, right? So subjective and objective don't seem to describe the things themselves. They seem to only be a function of how we're talking about them, right?
I think they're definitely different, right?
Me liking ice cream is an objective fact about the world, and it's also my subjective preference, right? So it depends how you're looking at it as to whether there can be a subjective statement, but a thing itself can't be subjective.
One is a truth claim, the other one is just sort of an opinion. And they can both relate to the same thing. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we disagree.
Yeah, but it is still true that I hold that opinion.
But then take that
That's a truth claim now.
Show me how that maps onto the other discussion.
Okay, sure. So whenever you look at anything, including someone's subjective experiences, whether they intended to do something or not, etc., that is an objective thing we can analyze, right? And we have evidence, though imperfect, as evidence always is, to determine what they intended, right? Like, so if someone stabbed someone 15 times in the chest and they said, "Oh, I didn't mean to," we would say that that's probably false. We wouldn't say, "Well, I can't know anything about your subjective internal world." It's like, no, it's probably false.
You can't know perfectly objectively that your preference is for ice cream. You can only examine evidence that you eat ice cream more often than other desserts. But you could be doing that for some sort of like deceptive, subversive reason to make people think you prefer ice cream. Like, you can't know that that's your preference. Only the person with that preference can know that objectively it is the case. That's why there's that line between subjective. Go ahead.
I think even the person can't really know that it is their preference. Like, I've had situations where I thought something was my preference, but I was wrong about my preferences, right? Like, so maybe you think you like ice cream, but actually you just had this one really good ice cream that was not normal. And so saying I like ice cream, you'd actually say in general, that's actually false. So when you make the statement, I like ice cream, whether or not it's true, that can be overturned by evidence.
It seems like you just made my case even stronger by saying that, though. Now the subjective judgment on ice cream seems even more different than the objectivity of what actually took place in historical reality. For example, you can look at a video of events that took place, and that is an objective recording of the photons that were in existence at that time. Sure. Whereas you just said you can't even prove to yourself that you prefer ice cream. Like,
I agree.
How are these two things not widely different?
But I think the same way. Oh, sorry. But yeah, I think the same way you can't prove to yourself that that thing happened that long time ago. Maybe the video was edited, right? You think that it wasn't, right? You can be confident that it wasn't, but that'll be based on some evidence. Like, what was the source of the video? If you know anything about how videos can be edited, you can maybe look for signs that it was. I don't think that you can ever know anything 100%, is what I'm saying. Like, you're always going to have some possibility of doubt. There's always going to be some potential that you could be wrong. And that seems identical between something that's in your head and something that's out of your head. Because ultimately the thing in your head, the brain, that thing between your ears, is a physical object in the universe that can be studied just like any other.
Well, that is an assumption that is just as subjective based on your own criteria as everything else. What's your argument against being a brain in a vat? I mean,
right.
How can you know?
Exactly. You can't. But I'm going to make some basic assumptions that my evidence is somewhat reflective of reality. evidence I get from my senses is somewhat reflective of reality. If you disagree, fine. We seem to live in different worlds, and our conversation seems to be pointless. But if you're willing to make that assumption with me,
I do not disagree for the record.
Yeah, if we're going to make that assumption, which almost everyone is, that our senses are somewhat indicative of reality and that logic seems to work, right? Then we can come to some kind of agreement based on providing reason and evidence that certain things are true. And during that whole thing, I could have been talking about subjective or objective things. I could have been talking about your preferences, everything I just said about seeing what the case is based on the evidence and reason. That I could have been talking about that. If you're talking about something objective, like the video that we saw about something in the past, there are reasons that could be wrong, but we come with reason and evidence to think that this is probably the case. And I think that's how all knowledge works.
Interesting. I'll have to give it a thought. Let's keep
this went in a very different direction.
I absolutely love it. And, maybe I'll have you on Disenthrall next and we can dive even more deeply into this conversation. I'd be happy to do that. So where do you live? Talk about blowing way past the basics in an interview.
Yeah.
We just discussed the nature of the universe and now I'm like, where do you live?
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I'm a brain in a vat, isn't what we established? No.
Yeah.
So,
under which tyrants do you suffer? Is another way of saying it.
Well, tyrant is right just about now. I suffer under chairwoman Jacinda. So,
okay.
Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand, basically. We were held up as an example of a country that we locked down. We listened to our glorious leaders, and we did whatever they said. And New Zealanders were very obedient, incredibly obedient. No protests against the lockdown. One protest for a black person being shot by a cop on the other side of the world for some reason. Like why that happened in New Zealand, I don't know. And apparently that was protected from COVID, so that's okay. Because those are always, those protests, the Black Lives Matter protest, didn't you know? It's scientifically proven you can't get COVID at one of those things.
Oh, of course not. Yeah. They're all wearing masks, of course. So,
so the country was incredibly obedient. And just recently, like a day or two ago, it was discovered that, actually there are a few cases. They said it was all wiped out. And there's now a few more cases discovered, showing that even if your population is incredibly obedient, you're on isolated islands in the middle of nowhere, this lockdown stuff is seeming pretty dubious.
Man, I've been following Australia a lot, and we have some viewers of Disenthrall that live in New Zealand as well. I had no idea that you were from New Zealand, by the way. I'm pretty informed about what's happening there, and it's pretty insanely tyrannical, especially with guns recently after the mosque shooting that happened and things like that. Dude, get out of there quick. Like, how would you, first of all, I think the world knows a lot more about what's happening in Australia, which is like second place only to communist China right now in terms of fascistic, insane control, lockdown stuff. But I think New Zealand's slightly better than Australia. Like, what's the difference?
No, I think New Zealand is better in terms of, you're seeing less drama from it, but to be honest, that seems to be because the people are more pacified. No one. So in my job, my day job, I don't do the YouTube and the libertarianisming for full time. But in my day job, I have talked to so many people who have had their businesses destroyed, who have had they're having to leave their current house because they can no longer afford it. Just all of the worst destruction of human well-being that you can imagine, and everyone kind of feels like they'd be a bad person if they talked about it, if they spoke out about it, and if they said that this is causing me a lot of pain. Because if you're saying that the lockdowns are causing you a lot of pain, there's sort of a knee-jerk reaction of so you want to just end it all and kill grandma, is that right? And so people just feel like this moral duty to just kind of suck it up and live with it. But because of that, all New Zealanders seem to just think that, this lockdown hasn't caused any problems for anyone. Right? The news doesn't report it. No one seems to be really caring about it. But if you actually talk to people on a daily basis about these sorts of things, I knew there was one woman I talked to who'd lost 2 jobs, basically. She had lost her job because of the lockdowns. And so she had managed to really quickly find one managing a cafe. And that's amazing to be able to find one so quick in that time. And now it looks like the cafe is going to have to shut down because it can't turn a profit because it keeps getting locked back down. So,
and the recent lockdown was only due to like several, like less than 5 deaths or something from COVID.
No, there were 4 cases, no deaths.
It was just
cases. There were 4 cases tested of COVID, and now it's up to 13 that they've got tested. But here's the thing, is that those numbers have to be kind of bullshit. They're saying, we think that the COVID got in on packaging of shipped-in goods, and it's like, maybe. Or maybe when you guys said that you'd eliminated it from these 2 islands, you're being wildly optimistic, right? That's something where you'd need to have tested a lot more people than you did. Right, because the people who are going to still have it are going to be in pockets. So even if you test a large percentage, you might have specifically missed that pocket. So you're not testing people really at random. So
now, forgive me if I have the politics wrong. The head lady, Jacinda, I forgot her name.
Jacinda Ardern, yes.
Is she an outright communist? Like, has she espoused sort of communistic ideals, or is that Australia? I could be mixing the two up, and I apologize if I am.
No. So in New Zealand, she's very left-wing. As far as I know, she's not called herself a communist, but the refrain from her and the leader of the party with which they made a coalition to become government, the refrain from in their speeches when they got into power was, "Capitalism has failed." And that is never something you want to hear from a leader, because that means that they plan to replace it with something. Yeah. So I don't know what's happening over in Australia. Maybe they have an outspoken communist that's even more clearly a communist than ours, but yeah, it's not looking good. And even before the lockdown, there was a lot of stupid, petty little things. They banned plastic bags, which, by the way, banning plastic bags, all you're doing is banning free bin liners at the supermarket, which I used to get. That's what they mostly get used for. You know, you get your plastic bag, you line your bin with it. Now I can't. It's just little petty things like that they've been doing to just...
What about censorship? Are they on the map in terms of taking down content and things like that is verboten?
Yes. You probably all know about the Christchurch shooting. That video, or the guy's manifesto that he wrote, if you share that, you go to jail.
Like actual jail for sharing a file.
Actual jail. People have gone to jail for that, for sharing the file, or like the what the guy wrote, or the video itself. You share that, you go to jail.
Wow. Can you even possess it? Is it like on the same level as like child pornography or something? Or
yeah, I believe so.
Wow.
To be fair, all of the articles that you will see about that stuff is always it's for sharing it, but I believe that it's actually illegal just to watch it, unless you are an officially recognized member of the press. Then you can watch the video and read the thing, but you have to pay the government for the privilege to do so.
Are there any local meetup groups of like anarcho-capitalists or voluntarist types there in New Zealand that you know of?
The strongest libertarian movement's called the ACT Party, and they have one member of parliament, and he's pretty middle of the road, right? Like, hey guys, maybe we should not have a minister of racing, which is like the minister in charge of horse racing. Like, maybe that's not a really necessary position. And it's like, yeah, you're probably right, David, but I kind of think that the fact we're all locked in the fact we're all locked in our homes is probably a bigger deal right now. But yeah, so I don't know. The ACT Party is actually pretty decent in terms of like their consistency, but it's consistently very milquetoast.
Okay. Well, yeah. There's been several New Zealanders that have reached out to me over the past year or so, and they all seem to think that they're totally alone in that country. It might be useful for you guys to sort of get together once a month or something, or even virtually or whatever, because everything's probably shut down right now, but... I don't know. It might be good to bolster some spirits of the refugees that are stuck there right now, right?
That's probably true. Like I said, with all the people I talk to, I get the impression that there is no one else like me. And actually, I don't encounter too many people online even who are openly from New Zealand who are actually speaking out about this stuff. If there are people, then they'll be anonymous online. So, because I struggle to find them. But yeah, now I just want to keep you all to keep in mind. This is New Zealand. If you look at, I think the most recent freedom indexes from, you take those with a grain of salt, but it's like from Human Progress and Cato and things like that. It's not nothing to do with freedom, even if they're not perfect. But New Zealand was consistently ranking at number 1. And this all kind of just collapsed very quickly.
Has that updated? Have you gotten a new number? A new score?
We haven't gotten a new number. I'm not looking forward to our new grade. Especially the economic freedom thing, I bet that's going to go down, and we are really reliant on that. I think the main reason New Zealand stays rich is because we're one of the few countries in the world with no capital gains tax. So people can invest here, and you want to invest somewhere, you can invest in New Zealand, keep 100% of what you make there. So that's that's still there, but everything else about our business freedom has gotten much worse. So I'm not looking forward to that ranking. But I just want to impress on people that this can happen really goddamn quickly. I think in America, you might have some bulwark against it, which is belief in the Constitution. Not the Constitution, mind you. I don't think the piece of paper helps, but people's belief in it might. Because people because it's on the piece of paper, they all kind of have this expectation it'll be followed. And so if they violate it a lot too quickly, I think that might create a lot of public backlash where it wouldn't in New Zealand.
Yeah, we have
no constitution.
We call it the Constitution argument, because the number of times I've heard people scream around me, but that's unconstitutional. And I'm like, well, they're still doing it anyway. Now what?
my favorite example, I can't remember who told me about this. I think I read it in a David Friedman book, but it was not very long after. It was like within the first 100 years of the US. The Supreme Court ruled that growing your own corn on your own property could be considered something that the government can make a law on. The federal government can. And why? It's not in the powers that are delegated to it. But there's the Interstate Commerce Commission. Wait, no, growing your own corn on your own property? Yes, growing your own corn on your own property. Because if you grow that corn, right, and then you consume it, in this case, the guy's case, feeds it to his own pigs, right? That means you won't buy that, and you might have bought it from out of state. So therefore, the government, under the Interstate Commerce Clause, can regulate you growing. If they're going to do that, they will twist it to mean anything.
Yeah, they can literally regulate anything by that interpretation of those words, which is the absurdity of the whole thing. And when you tell that to somebody and it doesn't break them out of that paradigm, it's just like a lost cause. Like, what do you even do at that point? Like, you believe these magic spell laws are going to save you from something when they repeatedly, over and over, do not do that, and you still believe in it. It's just a cult at that point. Like, sorry.
Yeah. But the thing that I want to remember, though, is while the Constitution itself on its own doesn't really help, those Constitution people who you have in your country, they do. They might be, not as radical as you'd like them to be, but trust me, without their counterweight, you'd be a lot worse off. We've seen it here.
So you don't have that counterweight, and then the government is able to sort of swing wildly towards leftism very quickly?
Yeah. Luckily, that means it might be able to swing really quick back. Our previous prime minister was John Key. He was basically like a very establishment neoliberal, which was good in some ways and bad in others. It meant we had very free international trade, which was super. It meant that free trade, he kept trying to sign these horrible trade agreements. That the problem with the trade agreement is, if you've listened to Hopper, he says that any real free trade agreement is going to have 2 sentences in it. Anything you want to ship in, you can ship in. Anything you want to ship out, you can ship out. Because what happens is you're going to have this free trade agreement that is going to have a whole lot of stipulations and probably some body organized to administrate it. And if you have that, then that sort of turns into a pseudo-government. And if you think that's alarmist, remember that the EU started as a free trade agreement between France and Germany. It was a coal and steel board or something like that.
Hey, we have one of the New Zealanders in the comments right now. Fallstar, what's up, man? Good to see you. He says, yeah, she was in a young communist party and had a communist speech when she got into power. He's up for a meetup. Oh wait, I'm in lockdown, he says. So there are New Zealanders out there.
Auckland too, then. He's in Auckland too, then, because Auckland's the only part that's fully locked down right now.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What? Let's talk about more about your YouTube channel. What made you start a YouTube channel back in the day? Was it just? I think you said you were starting to do sort of anti-SJW stuff.
Yeah, there was a Canadian feminist that was wrong, and I decided to respond to her. It was not a very good response, and you can't see that video up anymore. But it sort of got me started. One person commented on the first video uploaded that it was a good video. I subscribed, yo. And because that person commented, I was like, hey, maybe I should make more of these.
Nice.
So yeah, that's how I got started. But it's gradually spiraled from there, and from just basic liberal and the classic. I was basically Sargon before in my political views. Sargon of Akkad?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah. I was basically his political position when I started out on YouTube. That gradually changed first towards very strong, heavy nationalism, and then gradually towards anarchism.
What would be, some of your proudest achievements or videos that you've made? What are you most proud of, and what do you enjoy most? The two separate questions, but kind of related.
My proudest achievements... my favorite videos are the most recent ones because I've kind of stopped trying to be clickbaity and do the videos that I think people want me to make, and just made the ones that I kind of want to make. And whilst they have had fewer views, it's barely hitting 1,000 at the moment per video, maybe even less than that. They are more... I don't know, they're more thoughtful, and they teach me more while I'm researching enough to do the videos. So I've done one on free will, which I thought was really good. I was really happy with how that turned out. It was basically arguing that the entire free will debate is stupid, that not only are the people arguing for free will as some sort of violation of causality, not only is that incoherent, the people opposing free will on that basis is kind of incoherent. I'm going to argue that actually free will is only compatible with causality and determinism, which sounds counterintuitive to most people, but I think I make a good case.
Can you give us the case real quick? Just TLDR form? We don't have to go into it long form.
Sure. Sure. So let's say that you have the view that if so someone might make the argument, I'm going to do something, if that is just a process happening in my brain that's causal, for me, like picking this up and then putting it down, if that's a causal process, then I couldn't have changed it. And it's like, what if you are a causal process? Because as best we can tell, you are. If you have a pool ball knocks into another pool ball, did that first pool ball hit the other pool ball? Did it move that second pool ball? And I would say, yes, it did. And then you might say, well, no, it didn't, because the cue moved the original pool ball. It's like, but still, that ball was necessary in that process. Like that, you would still be apt to say that caused the other ball to move. And if that's the case, then I think it's still correct that you are responsible for your actions, that you are a causal process, specifically one that is free in that you can take actions based on a set of preferences, and it is a will in the sense that it is something that you will to happen.
So if you couldn't have chosen otherwise than to do that which you did, how are you also responsible? Because responsible brings in a sense of moral judgment or culpability.
Couldn't have in what context, though? So couldn't have how? So do you mean under the same... It's like, are you saying you couldn't have in the sense that if everything was exactly the same, you would have done the same thing?
Yeah.
Because if that's what you mean...
Yeah.
Yeah, but if that's what you mean, then that's necessarily the case, right? Even if you have free will. Because one characteristic of a situation is that it precedes another situation, right? Well, it precedes another situation. And so if everything was exactly the same in one moment, by definition, it is going to result in something else that's the same. Unless you're leaving some factors out, which is how we usually say could and couldn't. When I say you could have done something different, we mean that if some things that we're leaving fluid were different, but the majority of things that we're leaving the same were the same, those things could have altered it. And specifically, I think when we're saying you could have done something different, we mean that it was your brain chemistry that resulted in this action. As in, we could keep the rest of the world the same, change your preferences in some way, and the result would have been different. Whereas if we would keep the rest of the world the same, change your preferences in some way, and the result would stay the same, then we say you didn't have control over it, you weren't responsible, you did not have, your will was not free in this regard. Right? So you don't have free will with respect to the sun setting in the east.
My producer just put a link to that video on your channel in the comments for everybody following along. So if you want to go into more on that, that's great. And again, I'll probably bring you back on Disenthralled to talk through this in more detail. As a summary, though, does free will exist, and what's your definition of that, if so?
Yes, free will does exist. Will is when you have a set of preferences that you'd like to be fulfilled, right? So if you didn't have a set of preferences you wanted to be fulfilled, you wouldn't say that you're willing anything to happen, right? And you do have a set of preferences. And free is when you have some ability to alter the world in such a way that it will fulfill those preferences. If you have a will, like you want certain things to happen, but you don't have any ability to change them, then you're not free with respect to those things. If I chain you to the floor, you're not very free.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think I disagree with that at all, but I don't think that's the definition of free will that most people use when they think about it. So,
yes, that's the main thing that the video argues. That's why it takes 34 minutes, because the main thing I'm arguing is that kind of is the definition that you're usually using, and the definition that the intuition that determinism contradicts free will is kind of an illusion. That's a mistake that is based on a definition that you haven't really properly defined. Like if you try to define free will in such a way that it is not compatible with determinism, I think you will fail to come up with a coherent definition.
I agree. That's a bitter pill for a lot of people, but I agree. That's interesting. Yeah. So definitely I would suggest everybody go check out his video. I'll definitely check it out as well. So that's something you said that was like maybe your most proud creation so far on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I like that one, or maybe the Austrian economics one I did recently, trying to refute Austrian economics. But those more thoughtful videos, the last few videos, are my favorites.
I think they're both very quality. The recent Austrian one addressed 5 different points that he thinks the Austrians are wrong on, and some of them are seemingly very excellent points. And I hope that we're going to get some rebuttals and some debates coming soon. We'll see how that goes. Yeah. But
come on, debate me, Austrians.
This is something I would like to talk about. So part of what I do on my Disenthralled channel is I have this thing called Book Club, where I go and I try and find libertarian articles or things published in magazines or whatever that most people never see. The vast majority of libertarian thought, guys, does not exist on YouTube, does not exist in podcast form. The vast majority is squirreled away in these bookshelves or in these publications that no one either has time or the will to read. People just don't like reading books and stuff these days. And I'm not making a judgment of that. I'm just saying that is the state of existence right now. And so with the book club is I go and find these publications and I read them and I put them into YouTube video form so that people that consume content that way can find them. But there does seem to be this divide between the two sides. There's this very rich, diverse, full of debates, sort of YouTube talking head style realm where all kinds of ideas get discussed and debated. And there's a lot of wisdom that is to be found there. A lot of trolls and garbage as well, admittedly. And probably a much higher degree of trolls and garbage on YouTube than in publications, of course. But there's still a lot of value to be found there. And so a lot of what I want to try and do, especially with this channel, maybe over the next 3 months, let's say. The last 3 months was about me trying to expose activists to you guys and to show people that are out there on the streets in the real world trying to change the world for the better. The next 3 months I want to focus on the sort of YouTube debate realm, the YouTube thinker realm, where people are trying to create good work and good thoughts out there on the YouTube medium. And I'm trying to bridge that gap between the scholarly types and the YouTube types. And I'm trying to examine and figure out why, maybe you can speak to this, why there is this divide, why the scholars might not respect the YouTubers. And go ahead.
I think there's a few reasons. I actually do have something that I've been thinking about with regards to this. And the first thing is because what you're doing doesn't really exist yet. So what you're trying to do is you admit that there's tons of trolls, a lot of garbage, and it's difficult to find the gems amongst all of that. Okay, well, no one's done that work yet. No one's really got somewhere where you can go and be sure that you're going to get some quality content, because usually it'll be just like going through YouTube, right? Looking for libertarian channels. You're going to get a lot of crap, and I don't think that I can really blame the I don't know, the intellectuals. What are we going to call them? The academics.
Academics.
I think that was the guy. Yeah. The academic. I can't really blame them for not trolling through it. So maybe if there's someone who perhaps knows some of the academics, who's doing some investigation into the quality stuff that's out there on YouTube or blogs or Twitter or whatever, then it's actually going to start bridging that gap. So I think that's the first thing, is simply that, yeah, what you're doing there, I think it'll work, but it just hasn't been done yet. So that's why. But
why is there a lack of respect, though? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, finish what you're saying.
Yeah, but there's another part to it, which is, so libertarian academics, Austrian economists especially, have already got a very difficult time not being too much of a intellectual outcast, because they Austrian economists will. Bob Murphy speaks in front of Congress and things like that, and a company's willing to hire him, like some oil companies willing to hire him to defend them in some way, right? Why are they willing to do that? Well, because he has credentials, because he has some credibility. If the Austrians diverge too far away from mainstream academia and they just start hanging out with a bunch of trolls on the internet, that may chip away at their credibility. And so I think that's a legitimate worry. Right? It might be stupid. Maybe the mainstream culture should appreciate good ideas when they're good, not just when they have a bunch of letters after their name. But that's not the case. And if the academics want to use their credentials for good, there's some argument that they should avoid us. Yeah, just in all honesty.
Well, so yeah, it's an appeal to the degree. The letters after your name is an appeal to sort of some kind of authority, which is a non sequitur argument, right? Just because you have letters after your name in no way means that you're right. In fact, most of the people with letters after their name are wrong in most ways. But likewise, flapping your gums on YouTube in no way means that you're right either. But the degree process at least sort of holds you to account and provides some level of filter. For good and bad. Certainly it probably filters out people that don't toe the line and jump through the appropriate hoops to get the degree. That's a big part of it, and probably affects like things like psychology to a much greater extent than other things. Like if you're not a sort of a go along, get along, order following box checker, it's going to be very difficult for you to get like a degree in psychology, at least in this country, for example, which actually ends up then changing the diagnoses that some of them might make in terms of things like they'll see types of personalities that resist following orders as more strange than maybe they should, because it's like the process of becoming one selects against that. Anyway, I'm going to.
I'm skeptical entirely of the concept of mental illness. Actually, if you've ever encountered Thomas Zars?
I have not.
Okay, Rothbard was a big fan of his. Actually, he's a psychologist who has a book called The Myth of Mental Illness.
Okay,
and. Yeah, I don't know if I really want to. I shouldn't do more than just direct you towards that, because it's a very hairy debate to get into. But yeah, the concept of mental illness is perhaps less clear than you might have thought that it is.
I can definitely see that.
Look up Thomas Zars.
I can definitely see that.
SZASZ, by the way, is the last name.
Where that gets back to like the objective subjective thing, right? So it seems like a lot of the elements that they might make diagnoses on would be more towards the subjective side, if of that spectrum, than something objectively provable, right?
Well, that I think that subjective is objectively provable.
How?
Well, every bit as much. You can't know 100%.
Doesn't that contradict Zaz? I guess is where I was going with that.
No, I don't think it does contradict Zaz. Oh God, I'll get slightly into it.
We don't have to get into it if you don't want to. It's fine.
Okay, yeah, we've got enough topics going here. I think I've said enough shocking things to people so far.
So what? Back to your YouTube channel. What are you trying to do with it? What's your goal and strategy?
Learn is the main thing. I find that if I put my opinions out there, people respond to me. That's how I've learned to a large degree, and I want to continue to learn. I like learning stuff. It's just fun. I think that I am, I guess, an empiricist to a very high degree. I think that observing objective reality is how we imperfectly, but to some degree, take good actions and figure out what to do. But beyond that, I guess I do actually have some pretensions that I may be able to influence public opinion in my little way, which is, I think, what most libertarians think they're trying to do. If I'm not mistaken, the majority of libertarians think, well, what I'm doing is I'm getting together a bunch of ideas and I'm presenting them in an understandable way so that more people will be libertarians. I think that maybe if it's unsaid, that's what they're thinking. And I think there's something irrational about that, right? You don't, when you take that action, you're thinking of like, and that might result in a more libertarian society. Well, the impact you're going to make is going to be so small because there's so many people doing it that it's not really going to as a personal sort of selfish thing, you taking the action to advocate a political ideology is not going to net you the benefit of being able to live under that political system, right? If you, it's like voting. If you vote, right, the guy who was going to win would have won anyway. If you don't vote, the guy who was going to win, the election will not be decided by one vote, right? You're not going to make the difference. And you don't control everyone else around you. So there is an irrationality to political advocacy. But nonetheless, I feel like I feel good if I am contributing in some way, even if it's kind of meaningless on a selfish level. So I think I do have some pretensions that I'm going to have some impact on political opinion. And a few people have said that I have. So that's good.
And it's certainly possible, and it does feel good. And I started my channel with the purpose that you just called irrational, which was to create as many voluntarists as possible, and to do the best job at all different forms of activism. I've done street activism, YouTube videos. I ran for not governor of Texas in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
So
maybe I'm overstating it. I think I'm overstating when I say it's irrational. It's not irrational so long as you're aware that the only benefit you're going to get is that positive feeling that you are making your small difference. Right, because that feeling's all you're getting. You're not going to actually make a noticeable difference to the political system. That
was the exact point I was about to make. And what I found is that I just really have fun doing it. And the perfect example, and you can see this on a video I'm going to post on the Disenthrall channel later tonight. But I was in the park. We have a Voluntarist of Dallas meetup here. It's one of the largest in the world. We have a lot of voluntarists in Dallas, Texas. And I was sitting in the park waiting for people to arrive. I was just by myself in my chair. And a guy walks up to me with a camera and asks if he can talk to me about God, and asks if he could record the conversation. And I instantly lit up. Man, I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. Can I record it too? And so I recorded my end of it, and he proselytized to me in the park. And this is a guy that cares deeply enough and thinks that he thinks he's doing some good for me, and that's really kind of heroic. Absent the entire rest of it, it's like, why aren't more people doing that? He cares.
Well, no, I totally agree. People get always upset about that. Like, you've got some. If you talk to someone about religion ever, the most common response is that, oh, you shouldn't talk to me about this. Like, I'm not a Christian, but I had. So I've seen Christians try to proselytize to people, and it's like, oh, just, I don't mind if you're a Christian, but just, keep it out of my face. And it's like, that guy thinks you're burning in hell for all eternity if you don't believe this stuff. He'd be kind of a dick if he didn't try to convert you.
Right? If I thought you were about to die, I would try and convince you to not do whatever it was that was going to kill you. Of course.
Exactly.
How can I say I cared about you or was a good person if I didn't,
Yeah, I don't understand the sort of the perception of people who are like, oh, just don't proselytize to me. No, please, proselytize to me. If you think I'm wrong, I would like to be more right. Convince me.
Yeah, and so this guy got way more than he bargained for, walking up to a random person into a park when he talked to me. It was hilarious. And I had a blast. So that was my point. I really enjoyed this space. And so there's definitely a selfish, Ayn Rand would be proud of my lack of altruism in this area. It is selfish too. I really enjoy it. Yeah. What's next for your channel? Do you have any big plans?
I don't know. I'm thinking about doing something on what we're just talking about, on the irrationality of politics.
Cool.
But that's going to take a while. So I think I'm going to also do some stuff about how equality sucks. Basically, I think that a lot of people will say, I don't believe in equality of outcome. I believe in equality of opportunity, or something like that, which is kind of identical. Opportunity is just a different outcome. And so, okay, your opportunities are a set of things that happen to you, right? And if you think that those should be the same for everyone, right? Like, so whether you're offered some job as an opportunity, that shouldn't be equal for everyone. And it is just the same as an outcome. It's just a different set of outcomes.
Okay,
right?
so
that's kind of the same thing.
You're removing time from the equation. Like, so like an opportunity is just a possible, it's a choice, it's a possibility. And so
opportunity is
that
when
only
you
exists
get
because
some
something,
possibility.
right, that only, the possibility only exists because something already happened to create that for you. I see what you're saying.
Exactly. And if you take that equality of opportunity thing to its logical conclusion, because equality of opportunity is propounded by like people who think that they're opposing social justice warriors, like Jordan Peterson or Sargon of Akkad or people like that. But yeah, equality of opportunity, the logical conclusion is you can't read to your kids, because reading to your kids makes them more likely to, apparently there's some statistical evidence that shows that it raises their IQ on average. Well, that's going to give them opportunities that the kids who have parents that wouldn't read to their kids won't have. So you're creating inequality, you monster. Stop reading to your kids. And that might sound like it's a straw man, it's like, it's overblown, but there are actually articles and papers from academics saying specifically that you should not read to your kids because it creates inequality of opportunity.
That seems like an argument directed squarely at the people that are focused on outcomes, not so much the people that are like one group is saying, let's institute these controls to create the outcomes, and the other group is saying, look, leave people alone, let remove barriers. I guess it's the same thing. Interesting. All right, I look forward to your video. I look forward to your video. Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah, and to make it, I just want to say also, I imagine some people will think, oh, okay, but what about equality of rights? Shouldn't we all have equal rights? No. Wait for the video.
That's a little bit of a teaser. Okay, cliffhanger. Got it. All right, so you're a Nazi. It's going to be a coming out as a Nazi video.
Yeah, libertarian Nazi. That's my niche.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about today?
I don't know. We've kind of gone all over the show. It started out as we're going to interview me about what I'm doing, but we got into some good debates. I mean, so I guess I also did want to kind of know, what is your impression of New Zealand? Like, speaking as an American, I mean, before this whole lockdown thing, did you think of New Zealand as, it's this nice free place? Or did you already kind of think that it was... Yeah, I want to know how our perception has changed.
I'll give you two answers. One based on how most Americans picture New Zealand, and one on me, because I have exposure to people from New Zealand that are anarcho-capitalists that give me a more accurate representation. So I think most Americans see it as a satellite island of Australia, and they probably don't mark a great difference between the two.
It is further from Auckland to Sydney than it is from London to Moscow. I think I just got that right. But yeah, it's not close. There's a giant ocean in between.
Now, I could be just speaking for Texans who pretty much ignore anything outside of Texas, but I think a lot of people don't really mark much of a distinction. And I think the general public probably sees it as a more rural area, like not big industrial cities. That's not, disparaging it in any way. That's the description I think most people, or the impression most people have of it. And I think
there's a lot of it that is like that.
And I think it has a reputation of being a bastion of freedom. Like, it's a little bubble of really good free market area. And I think that is the biggest change that has happened, is like, now it is on the bottom of my list of places I would want to go rather than the top if I wanted to escape to freedom. And that's me speaking from my direct experience from the people that I know that live there now. So,
okay, right, and that's pretty much correct then. So if it's your experience is basically right, I think. But do you think that the average American has kind of the same view?
As it having lost its freedomness? No, I don't think most people are aware of anything that happens in New Zealand. And I could be projecting my Texas-inity. But no,
that's true.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, Americans just stereotypically, it's probably an accurate stereotype that most Americans don't care terribly about what happens outside in other countries. Again, I could be projecting Texas. I don't know.
Well, if for anyone who doesn't know about it, take a look into like the New Zealand a few years ago, New Zealand now, and just remember that being free is something that you actually have to put a lot of effort into. That if there's no one who's actually going to stand up against it, it turns out the government isn't just going to just go, well, we'll leave them alone. It's like, no, the government is an institution of force and only understands likewise.
Well, don't say something that will get you caged, because I literally know that there are things that you could say right now that would get you caged, which is an important point in and of itself. But what would you suggest people do? Like, what would you call on someone to do to resist it?
I don't know the first real step, but finding other like-minded people would be the first thing. So if you're a New Zealander and you do want to like do meetups and stuff, hit me up Twitter @DannyCanTalk.
There you go. So, and just if it helps, my talk at Anarchapulco in 2019 was about forging your own tribe and about how to actually start a meetup group like we've done here in Dallas. I don't think it'll map one-to-one for New Zealand, but there's probably some good tips in there for getting it started. And I would love to see you guys hook up, even if there's only 4 of you in the whole country. Like, tell me, report back. I want to hear it. Like, you guys need it.
Okay.
Something.
Will do.
All right, awesome. Well,
I'll absolutely do that. Awesome.
I was an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope to do it more often and again. So thank you for being on the show today, sir.
Thanks very much for having me. All right, have a good one.
All right, everybody, check out his YouTube channel in the description, and I will see you guys next time. Peace, love, and anarchy.